Hey guys, I got a question about learning web design and web development in 2019. Is it worth it? Hey Stefan, I'm a beginning web developer, self-teaching. My question would be, is it still worth studying web development in 2019 when stuff like Webflow claim to take the need to code out of the process of web development? Of course it's still worth it. Webflow should be considered just another tool in the toolbox as a professional web developer or web designer or web professional, depending on how you want to look at it. There's all these different titles. The titles change over the years, went from web designer to web developer to web programmer, etc., etc., etc. Front end, full stack, back end developer. These are all different specializations within the same global workspace, if you will, right? Everybody's working on the web. Some people specialize with the client-side programming. Some people specialize with the back end. Some do a full stack, yada, 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 yada. So the question is web development still going to be around 2019 when you got Webflow? This claim of products that will take away the need to code, this has been going on for 20 years. Now, they are getting better and better and more sophisticated with it. At the end of the day, as a web professional, whatever part of the stack you work on, front end, back end, etc., as a web professional, there's much more to putting together a solid website and especially a web app than just the code, as I explained. That's why in my interactive web developer course, I teach much more than just the code. And it's such an important part. So we have, I have hundreds of videos, well over 1,000 quiz questions, a lot of questions about structure, infrastructure, and best practices, etc., etc., etc. These are all things that Webflow or any other piece of software will not be able to do without you being able to guide it, right? It's not an artificial intelligence. Professional decisions as a web professional have to be made about what route you're going to take. So, for example, a similar situation we had with WordPress many years ago. When WordPress started growing and other content management systems, WordPress, Drupal, Joomla are the big ones. Mostly WordPress dominates. A lot of designers said, oh no, WordPress is going to destroy web design. It didn't destroy web design. It just changed the focus of web design. And in fact, now WordPress professionals print money. They print money. Because there's a bit of a barrier to entry to learn WordPress, believe it or not, and to understand the ecosystem, to understand especially the theming. That's why one of the key courses in my interactive web developer course is the theming course, to teach you how to sort of create a theme, which is just the template for WordPress sites. Now, you may not build themes from scratch because the WordPress ecosystem has thousands, not tens of thousands of templates, but you still need to understand how themes work to be able to go in there and tinker and adjust the themes so that they work the way you need them to work. So yes, when WordPress first came out, a lot of people thought, oh no, WordPress, oh, web design is over. But now you have this huge industry of WordPress professionals that print money, make a ton of money. So the game of being a professional web professional or web developer, designer, etc., has shifted. So, for example, in the late 90s, when you were a professional web designer, those guys and girls were mostly not freelancing, but they were, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a term I can't remember now. But a lot of the web designers back in the mid-90s, late 90s rather, were really just graphic artists who just jumped into the web design game because there was such a huge demand for web design. And all they would do would be to create nice looking, aesthetically pleasing layouts in Photoshop typically, or CorelDRAW or something. And then they would cut up all the photos, all the images in their layout in Photoshop, and then they would bring it into an application like Dreamweaver or Hotdog, which was a code editor, or Go Live, which was Adobe's web design software. And then they would reconstruct, stick all the images together in code with the help of these programs and then put up the sites. But those are extremely primitive websites compared to today's standards. So over the years that shifted. So it became web design became no longer about being Photoshop centric and became much more code centric in around say 2000, 2002, 2003. So things shift. So the skill set shifted, became actually much more professional. I would argue that come around 2003, when the web standards movement, 2001, 2, 3, I forget, I'm getting so old, I forget the exact time. In that time frame, the profession of professional web designer, it really came into of itself. It became very, very involved, where graphic designers could no longer, this is the word I was looking for before, they could no longer moonlight as web designers because they needed a real solid set of skills, whereas before it was kind of a hodgepodge. What does that mean? In the 90s, late 90s, web designers, a lot of them could be graphic designers just moonlighting. But by 2002, 3, with the web standards movements, with security, with the understanding of the importance of SEO, all that changed, and you had really then, in my opinion, the true birth of the front-end web designer, developer, web professional. And I would argue that today it's shifted a little bit more, not as drastically as it did from the early 90s to early 2000s, but it shifted more where you as a web professional have to understand not only the code and all the fundamentals behind the code, that's HTML5, CSS3, a little bit of JavaScript, I would argue a little PHP, since so many small sites are run on PHP. You also have to understand WordPress. You don't necessarily have to be a master at WordPress, but just understand where it stands, what it can do, where it's useful to use a content management system like WordPress or Drupal perhaps. And if you want to get into more web developer, where you're really building applications out of, turning websites into applications, if you will, then you have to understand another layer, server-side coding, databases, web frameworks. Sometimes when you're developing web apps, it makes sense to just use plain old vanilla PHP or plain old vanilla Python or plain old vanilla, I don't know, JavaScript, for example. But sometimes it makes sense to use a framework. That all said and done, when it comes to, I'm going off on tangents, but that's what I do, right? So when you're doing in 2019, when you're building web applications, these days my top two choices are PHP and Node.js. PHP Laravel specifically. PHP is the language, Laravel is the framework, and Node is the engine. JavaScript is the language for server-side. These are my two top choices are those stacks, if you will. And which one you choose depends on individual circumstances. Maybe I could do a dedicated video on that. People wanted to know. Now, Java server-side, Python server-side with Django or Flask, C# and .NET programming for web applications. These three options are also extremely viable as well. And there's a few other really hyper niche things like Code Fusion and Perl, perhaps. But those other three, and they got Ruby on Rails, of course. Just joking about it. See, red jacket. That shows my support for Ruby. That's a joke. When you're looking at C#.NET and you're looking at Java, those are for very large organizations. I would never build anything new with those personally because it's just slow compared to doing the same thing with Node.js and PHP. Python Django is an option as well, although it's a very small community compared to the Node community, compared to the PHP community. And you have to look at the community whenever you're looking at a technology stack, because you don't want to find yourself in a tiny little community where there's no help, right? Or you find that the development is just slowly fading away. You don't want to be in a technology stack that's is becoming obsolete over time. Whereas with Laravel and PHP 7, it's like they're on top of the game. They're innovating like crazy because it's such a huge market share. Yeah, so C#, Java, those are for enterprise, so not for any new things. Python, Django is viable, but again, it's kind of nichey. I would be very reluctant. Ruby, it's kind of nichey, so I'd be reluctant with that, although there is a strong core community, but I think that's going to really fade out over time. So those are my two choices. So yeah, in 2019, to get back to the original subject of the video, I think this is it because I've been talking for a long time. In 2019, web development and web design is huge and growing even more. I actually believe that understanding the web stack, the web tech, HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript, those are the key. And then from there, you got different tangents you go on. I think this is like, can't lose learning. Can't lose learning these things. Can't lose, because they're used all over the place. Create websites, create web apps, create mobile apps, all kinds of different things, all over the place. It's all over the place. It's not going to go away anytime soon. And you got to remember, even people who have Wix sites, right? They don't know anything about proper usability. They don't understand about how to set up how to set up carts and stuff. So, for example, I was talking to a friend of mine. His buddy owns a high-end car repair shop, right? They deal with Lamborghini, Porsche, Audi, that kind of stuff. And he wants to put up a Squarespace site. The owner, he's his brother, like, he doesn't know what to do. Doesn't know how to prepare images. He doesn't know how to set it up. He doesn't know about setting it all up, and doesn't have time. So my friends, he's going to do it for him, and he's not even a coder, but it's like, it's work. So there is a profession there, and I've actually seen job listings on Indeed.com for Wix professionals. Now, Wix web designers see Wix as competition. Don't. It's a tool. Don't see it as competition. You see it as a tool. It's another tool. It's another tool to leverage. So they're paying Wix professionals pretty good money to just use Wix. And I have to admit, when I first saw it, I was kind of surprised. It's because it's point and click, drag and drop, but it goes way beyond that. Wix, to add an extra level of sophistication, they have an API layer, basically, where you can access much more powerful aspects of the Wix engine, if you will. But you have to write JavaScript. You have to be a JavaScript programmer. How many business owners, small business owners, are JavaScript programmers, right? Nobody. So there's probably going to be a growing market for people who are experts at Shopify implementations, Wix implementations, Squarespace implementations. There's already a huge marketplace for WordPress experts. I call it WordPress professionals. I coined it in 2006, I think. I wrote some blogs about it. I called it the WordPress web designer. I said it was going to be a huge thing. And sure enough, some people have made huge amounts of money putting out template-based WordPress services and so forth. Huge amounts of money. So don't worry about web design. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I'll leave you with this. He's a partner with Google. Google's invested in his startup. And we were talking. He used to work for me, and I trained him up. And he said, yeah, we were talking, it was like a month ago or something. And I said to him, it's funny, after all, 20 years now, I've been writing HTML, I've been writing code since 1994. And I said, after all this time, the web stuff is still the king. It's still the king. And it's actually getting stronger now. It's getting stronger now. I think because the web technology is sophisticated, performant, universal, open, it is going to be more and more widely adopted rather than less and less. That's why I've done those videos. My famous video where over 100,000 views where I said, Swift is going down, and all these Swift people went bananas on Twitter, apparently. And it was not a criticism of the Swift language. I think architecturally Swift is a freaking cool language, especially what IBM is doing it with their Katura server-side platform on the back end. But I think it's niche. I think that people are going to be leveraging the web stack more and more and more and more and more and more and more. So don't worry about it. Learn the web stack, and you're going to be fine for decades. For decades. All right, that's enough of my rambling. Wow. See, right now it's 15 minutes. I don't know what it's going to be when I end up editing it, but yeah. All right, I hope you found this vlog informative. I don't know, I feel energetic since I cut my hair. My energy levels have gone up.